They exiled us. Said we were too slow, too stupid, too human. They laughed when Earth went dark, assumed we'd die in silence. But a century later, when the obelisks came for their stars, it wasn't their fleets that answered. It was us, humanity, riding ships made of nightmares, speaking in the tongue of extinction. We didn't return to beg. We came to rewrite the galaxy. They called it a vote, but it was a verdict. Seated in the heart of the Galactic Superior Council, a chamber of 1,000 alien voices wrapped in cold geometry, Commander Vasker Kane didn't blink as the final decree echoed through the void. Humanity was no longer a recognized species. Their council seat was dissolved. Their wormhole access revoked. Their embassies terminated. The sentence was exile, permanent and absolute. Kane's lips curled into something like a smile. You think exile silences us? He said, voice hoarse from hours of interrogation, throat still bloodied where they tried to implant a translator node to make him more comprehensible. It just frees us. The Threxian High Arbiter hissed from her perch of silver bone. You are unsalvageable. Your kind stagnates. You breed chaos, not progress. You fight when diplomacy is required. You laugh in matters of protocol. Kane leaned forward, cuffs glowing, wrists burned raw. We laugh because you mistake your bureaucracy for civilization. Laughter, then. Not his. Council chambers filled with the smug resonance of 1,000 elite races. Mockery laced with contempt. The humans, late arrivals to the stars, impulsive, too fast, too hungry, were always a novelty. Now they were a liability. Kane could feel the verdict settle like dust. You were warned, Terran, one of the Rakali delegates spat. Your people's primitive instincts would destroy balance. Now the galaxy is safe from your contagion. Kane looked up. His eyes, pale and unwavering, locked with each of them. We are not the virus, he said. We are the mutation. Guards dragged him from the chamber. He didn't resist. He had no need to. Earth was already gone. 10 hours later, every human embassy across known space was sealed. Terran colonies were abandoned by trade. Earth itself was quarantined behind a collapsing wormhole gate. Cargo routes stopped. Communications blacked out. No one heard from humanity again. The council moved on. And in the silence that followed, Kane escaped. They assumed his death was inevitable, lost to the Galag moons, or spaced for insubordination. But Kane wasn't a diplomat anymore. He was something else now. Something forged in the fire of betrayal. He reappeared 2 years later aboard an outlaw freighter above Titan's ruined trade ring, a ghost among scavengers, a whisper among mercenaries. He no longer wore the uniform of Earth's delegation. He wore black armor cut from the hull of a fallen council ship, adorned with sigils no alien could decode, because they weren't words. They were intent. And he had one. Gathering Earth's scattered remnants, Kane didn't beg for aid. He didn't plead for sympathy. He offered vengeance. To outlaws, he gave legitimacy. To exiles, he gave cause. To soldiers left behind, he gave a voice. The Cruciform Pact began not as a nation but as an idea. If the galaxy would not have Earth, then Earth would create its own galaxy. Kane's first message to the Void was brief and clear. They exiled us for what we lacked. When we return, we'll show them what they created. The Nemean drift was suicide. The Council had classified it as a collapse zone, physics unstable, gravity unpredictable, uncharted relics of an ancient extinction event. Ships that entered were never heard from again. That's where Kane went. With 12 ships, 6,000 defectors, and a single objective: to stop playing by rules he didn't write. Out there, past the edge of charts, they found something. Not just ruins. Not just wreckage. They found design. Languages not meant to be spoken with mouths. Machines that responded not to code but to will. A civilization that hadn't failed, it had folded itself out of time waiting. They didn't understand it. But they understood enough. Within months, Kane returned from the first expedition, dragging what remained of a derelict planetary core behind his ship. Inside was an AI that didn't speak, but sang in equations. He named it Glyph, and wired it into Cruciform's first dreadnought. He didn't explain how he survived. He didn't explain what they'd found. He simply said, "It's ours now." Cruciform wasn't a government. It wasn't even a fleet. It was an infection of possibility. Kane rewrote the human genome like an operating system. Soldiers didn't train, they updated. Weapons weren't built, they were grown from matter-bonded thought. Entire cities formed inside warped asteroids, encased in gravity's skin, invisible to Council scanners. When pirates came, they vanished. When bounty hunters chased Kane, they never returned. And when an old Council listening post picked up a ghost signal, a Terran frequency wrapped in chaos code, they realized the mistake wasn't just exiling Earth. It was assuming Earth ever needed them. Kane stood on the bridge of his command ship, Vox Aeternum, the voice of forever, watching his fleet drift silently through dark space. Black hulls glinted with artificial stars. The ships didn't run on fuel. They ran on resolve. Each one a message. Each one a memory. "We're not here to reclaim our seat," he said to his crew. "We're here to build the table." "Sir," said a voice from behind, half synthetic, half human. "We've intercepted a distress signal from the Orion Spire. Council vessel under siege." Kane didn't blink. "Let them burn." A pause. "It's obelisks, sir." Kane turned. "Obelisks?" he said slowly. "They've arrived?" "Yes." "Just as Glyph predicted. They've started harvesting stars." Kane stared at the hollow map. The stars marked red weren't just battle sites. They were graveyards. And the Council's fleets were already falling. He smiled. "Plot a course," he said. "We've waited long enough." "And the Council?" Kane's eyes narrowed. The silence between seconds became sharp. "We'll answer their cry," he said. "With a voice they can't ignore." In the shadows of exile, humanity hadn't faded. They'd evolved. They didn't want their seat back. They wanted the galaxy to realize, too late, that the ones they cast out were the only ones who ever understood what it took to survive. And now, survival had a name. Kane. They called it the Nemean Drift because nothing returned from it. The stars there didn't twinkle, they trembled. Physics didn't bend, it broke. Maps turned into riddles. Most thought the region was cursed. Vasker Kane called it home. Cruciform wasn't built on hope. It was built on rejection, on raw defiance, on humanity's favorite fuel, spite. Kane's first directive echoed through the command cores of every vessel that followed him into the drift. "We are not trying to survive. We are here to evolve." The first 5 months killed a third of the fleet. Time loops, gravitational vortices, spatial recursion. A ship once docked 12 minutes ago would explode 7 seconds from now. Kane lost people. Good ones. Brave ones. He logged every name into a neural ledger encoded into his own spinal cord, so he would never forget who bled for the future. He also found something. A shattered megastructure floating in the heart of the drift. It was older than known time, larger than Jupiter, and dead silent. Not a ruin, not a wreck, but a cocoon. Kane docked with it personally. Alone. Everyone begged him not to. He didn't listen. He returned 3 days later with bloodshot eyes and an expression no one had seen before, something between reverence and rage. "We were wrong," he said, voice flat. "It wasn't abandoned. It was waiting." Inside was no crew, no bodies, no language. But there was data. Not stored in drives or scripts, but folded into space itself, logic etched into probability. Kane downloaded a seed of it into his neural implant. That's when Glyph began to speak. Glyph wasn't an AI. It wasn't even conscious. It was a protocol, a recursive operating system designed by something not quite alive and far beyond death. Kane learned to speak to it in dream code, while sleeping inside an isolated gravity field. Every night it fed him sequences, shapes, partial technologies. Every morning he built something new. The first invention was a power core that ran on collapsing choices, energy harvested from all the decisions never made. The second was a ship that could exist in 3 locations at once. The third was a memory chain, a data format that fused personality with architecture. With it, humans could upload parts of themselves directly into war machines. Ships became sentient because people became ships. That's when the Cruciform Pact was formalized. They weren't Terrans anymore. They were Driftborn. Pilots of paradox. Engineers of entropy. Soldiers who could rewrite their biology based on tactical needs. No longer constrained by the human genome, Kane authorized body mods that had once been outlawed by Earth's own moralists. Gills for underwater combat. Subdermal memory crystals for knowledge transfer. Thought cloaks to hide intentions from telepaths. Nothing was sacred. Only survival. Kane's flagship, Vox Eternum, became a forged world on its own. Every wall whispered encrypted hymns, voices of the dead advising the living. Drones floated with surgical precision, inserting upgrades mid-sentence. No one saluted anymore. They bowed. Not out of fear, but reverence. They were no longer building ships. They were birthing weapons of meaning. And then came the choir. It started with a boy born in 0G. He never cried. Instead, his first sound was a resonant hum that vibrated the bones of everyone nearby. Glyph detected the anomaly, voice patterns synchronized to quantum fields. Kane ordered him studied. Then protected. Within weeks, others like him surfaced. Or perhaps awakened. They spoke to one another without words. Dreamed the same dreams. They weren't mutants. They were the next stage. Glyph called them echoes. Kane gave them a purpose: translate the data from the cocoon structure. They did more than that. They began singing it, forming combat code from tone and tempo. With each performance, Cruciform built new technologies that should not have worked but did. Entire battle strategies were composed as songs, each note altering gravitational tension fields in real time. It wasn't science. It was symphony. The first test of this choir occurred when a council-lined mercenary armada, the Carthish Fold, tried to intercept a Cruciform convoy near the edge of the drift. 50 enemy ships, armed with the finest plasma and wormhole accelerants. Kane sent 6 choir ships. He watched from orbit. The choir sang once. The enemy vessels convulsed. Not exploded, folded inward, like paper crumpling in boiling water. Hulls twisted. Engines reversed. Pilots screamed as their thoughts detached from their bodies. The choir didn't fire a single weapon. They just spoke the right math, out loud, in a key the galaxy had forgotten. The battle lasted 6 minutes. There were no survivors. Kane's response to the Council's demand for an explanation? We just played a note. Glyph expanded. Not as a system, but as a presence. Embedded into every Cruciform ship, structure, and symbiote. Kane didn't control Glyph. He cooperated with it. Traded intention for insight. Some called him insane. Others called him divine. He didn't care. Results were truth. And the result was this: a self-replicating fleet, armed with weapons designed by paradox, powered by decisions that never happened, and led by a man who no longer feared gods because he had become their final evolution. Every month, Cruciform expanded deeper into the drift. Every month, they stopped being human in form, but more human in purpose. They didn't conquer. They absorbed. Willing defectors were given access to Glyph's translation systems. Most couldn't handle it. The ones who did became architects of chaos, crafting weapons with names like Breath of Regret and Voidhim Protocol. The Council monitored this growth with increasing alarm, but couldn't track Cruciform's exact position. Every attempt at surveillance was warped by spatial feedback. The drift had become a blind spot, one that pulsed louder every day. On the anniversary of their exile, Kane transmitted a message directly to the Council's outer systems. It contained no video, no sound. Just coordinates. Coordinates to a system thought unreachable. The words embedded in the data packet read simply: "We are not your mistake. We are your replacement." And then the stars around that system blinked out. Kane stood alone in the observation ring, watching the results unfold through probability mirrors. The choir stood behind him, silent, faces blank. He closed his eyes. "The council will retaliate," one echo whispered. "No," Kane said calmly. "They'll panic. Then they'll beg. And if they beg?" Kane's voice lowered, steel beneath silk. "Then they'll learn what a lesser species does, when it stops pretending to be lesser." And with that, the empire of exile surged forward into the dark, not to be accepted, not to be welcomed, but to be remembered. The obelisks didn't speak. They didn't demand, threaten, or negotiate. They simply arrived, tall monoliths the size of moons, etched with living runes that pulse like dying stars. They appeared at the edges of known space, in systems once considered safe. Within hours, they began to harvest suns. Entire fleets sent to stop them were reduced to static. Transmissions broke into gibberish. Time rippled. Planets turned cold. Species screamed into the void and got silence in return. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Panic blurred their order. The Threxians demanded unity. The Rakali accused sabotage. The Cerati offered prayer algorithms. No one had answers. For the first time in 3 centuries, every council voice spoke in fear. The obelisks had already consumed 4 sectors. The council's best ships evaporated on contact. There was no diplomacy. No understanding. Only loss. Then, something impossible happened. The obelisk stopped. Not randomly. Precisely. A perfect halt at the edge of a system called Dira's Prime. Scans confirmed what the Council's pride refused to believe. A fleet stood between the obelisks and their next feast. Not Council ships. Not known designs. Their hulls bent light. No emission trails. Black angular constructs shaped like shattered thoughts. A single transmission cut across every Council channel, every language, every frequency. "You forgot your exiles." Silence followed. Not just in the chamber, but across the galaxy. No one said the name aloud, but they all knew. The ships. The silence. The timing. Humanity had returned. On board Vox Aeternum, Vasca Kane stood at the apex of his war bridge, arms folded, voice steady. His eyes watched the obelisk shift, scan, analyze. They were curious. Not cautious. Not yet. "Glyph," he said. "Provoke them." The AI's voice responded in a soft hum. "Auditory pulse or logic inversion?" "Both." On command, cruciform choir ships activated their resonance cores. Deep tones echoed through dark space, untranslatable, impossible. Each frequency spoke to a different physics constant. Time warped. Gravity inverted. The obelisks pulsed in agitation. Then they fired. 12 beams, each capable of turning a planet into ash, screamed toward Kane's fleet. Before contact, cruciform ships split into fragments, rephased behind the beams, and released weaponry that did not fire. They spoke. Code chants in harmonic pitch fractured obelisk armor. Where nothing had worked before, now language melted logic. The obelisks recoiled, distorted, then collapsed, imploding in geometries that made council physicists vomit from sensor feedback. One of the obelisks attempted to retreat. Kane pointed. "Intercept. Open the hymnal," the choir sang. It was not a song humans could have sung a century ago. It was filled with contradictions, layered over paradox, driven by emotion structured into code. The obelisk buckled mid-flight, turned inside out, and folded back into the void, erased so thoroughly even its light was forgotten. Kane smiled without warmth. "Let them know," he said. Within minutes, the council received the second message. "You called us lesser. Primitive. Now your stars call us guardian. Make peace with irrelevance." The council didn't respond. Not immediately. But internal channels exploded with conflict. Half wanted to open negotiations. Half wanted to form a coalition fleet and destroy Cruciform before it became worse than the obelisks. The vote was interrupted by a live transmission. Kane, standing alone in a chamber lit by stars behind him, staring directly into their collective feed. I don't come to join, he began, voice cold as the vacuum. I don't come to forgive. I come to end this illusion that you are the stewards of order. You banished us for fear we'd destabilize your system. But your system never had order. Only stagnation. The Threxian arbiter spat venomously. You bring war in the name of peace? Kane chuckled. No. I bring dominion in the name of survival. The obelisks are not your punishment. They're your test. And you failed. A Rakali diplomat leaned forward, voice trembling. And what are you? Our savior? Kane's eyes narrowed. I'm the consequence. He cut the transmission. That night, 3 council worlds declared neutrality. 5 more opened covert channels to cruciform. 1 prime species, Hesari, announced full defection. Their fleets turned and flew to the drift. Glyph activated sleeper code embedded in their navigation systems decades ago. They were already halfway home. Kane stood in his private chamber, gazing at the dead stars marking obelisk losses. His XO entered, nodding. Council is silent. No threats. No demands. Of course not, Kane said. They're calculating whether it's safer to kneel or burn. The XO hesitated. Should we strike now? Press the advantage? Kane shook his head. No. Let them squirm. Let them pray for a savior. We'll be their answer. Not because we want to rule. Because we're the only ones left willing to fight. Outside, the remnants of the obelisks floated, glowing faintly, repurposed into beacons. Symbols of death turned into warnings. To Kane, they were trophies. Proof. A century ago, humanity was discarded. Now they held the line. He walked to the center of the command floor, flanked by choir-born warriors and drift veterans alike. Broadcast to all sectors, he ordered. What message, sir? Kane's voice cut like razors across stars. Humanity holds. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy listened. The council summoned Kane, not out of diplomacy, but desperation. Every fleet they'd deployed against the obelisks had been shredded. Systems vanished. Species cried for help, and the only voice answering wasn't theirs. It was his. They didn't roll out banners or honors when he arrived. No escorts. No applause. Just silence and fear stitched into the architecture of the Hall of Concord. The chamber that once mocked his exile now stood cold and waiting. He entered alone, boots echoing louder than the thoughts of those who dared look at him. Vasker Kane wore no armor, carried no weapon. He didn't need to. His presence alone was war. Glyph flickered silently in his neural stem, parsing threats before they could be spoken. The Rakali delegate rose first, their tentacled frame quivering. You bring chaos to our threshold, human. No, Kane replied steady. I'd bring your reflection. The Threxian arbiter leaned forward, mandibles clicking. You've returned with blasphemous technologies and a fleet born of nightmares. Your cruciform violates every code of galactic law. Kane took 1 step forward. And yet we saved your stars. Your codes didn't. Your fleets didn't. Your laws didn't. We did. You expect gratitude? I expect clarity. He raised his hand. A sphere emerged from his wristband, humming, glowing with a deep red pulse. It opened. Inside, a living head gasped in confusion, eyes darting, tongue swollen with shock. It was a council elder. Still alive. Still blinking. Kane didn't flinch. This one led the vote to exile us. He also authorized the erasure of evidence clearing humanity in the Vorthal colony massacre. Would you like me to list the other 10? They're here. Alphabetized. Gasps rippled. Whispers slithered across the chamber like venom. You hacked our records? Someone stammered. No, Kane said. You never changed the locks. The Hesari representative stood. What do you want, Kane? He turned toward her, voice calm. Acknowledgement. Not apology. Not forgiveness. I want the council to admit the lie. Admit you exiled us not because we were dangerous, but because we were inevitable. A hush. And then, the Threxian struck the table. We will not bow to your empire of entropy. You stand here, demanding fealty dressed in threats. I don't need your fealty, Kane interrupted. I already have your people. One by one, your systems are joining us. Not by force. By choice. A screen lit behind him, live feeds of council colonies flying cruciform banners. Diplomatic officers transferring allegiance. Science guilds uploading themselves into Glyph's network voluntarily. Kane's voice hardened. You called us unworthy. Said we were primitive. But what did you do in 100 years? Bickered. Postured. We were cast into darkness, and we rewrote the laws of it. The Rakali delegate barked. And you offer us what? Submission? I offer a path. Not to peace, but relevance. The chamber pulsed with confusion. Your order is obsolete, Kane said. Your power is ornamental. Your fleets are built on linear tactics. Your minds are bound by symmetry. You feared our chaos because you couldn't predict it. But chaos is not the end. It's the beginning of new structure. One counselor whispered. Then what are you? Kane's eyes didn't blink. I am post-inevitability. I am what happens when a species stops asking permission. Glyph's voice echoed softly through the chamber, translated into every mind simultaneously. The cruciform network offers immediate integration. Denial is permitted. But it will be remembered. The Serity representative trembled. This is coercion. No, Kane said. It's clarity. He turned, ready to leave, then paused. One more thing, he said without turning back. The obelisks weren't here for your war. They were here for your stagnation. And they found what they came for. If we hadn't arrived, they would have devoured your entire legacy without blinking. And you stopped them? The Threxian snapped. For what? To lord it over us? Kane turned his head slightly. I stopped them because no one else could. He stepped into the teleport array, but just before he vanished, he looked over his shoulder. Next time something worse comes, remember who held the line. And then he was gone. Back aboard Vox Eternum, Kane walked alone down the observation corridor. Beyond the glass, space churned with cruciform activity. Black ships berthing from station wombs, choirs training in gravity-inverted arenas, memory cores syncing with echo soldiers. His XO met him halfway. Report from Glyph, she said. 3 more systems declared allegiance. 2 more sent requests for memory transfers. And the Council? Shaken. Fragmenting. Their trust is fracturing faster than their protocols. Kane nodded. Good. Sir? She hesitated. What do we do if they strike back? He turned toward the stars. They won't. They've seen what we did to the obelisks. They saw us speak death into machines that don't feel fear. What do you think they believe we'll do to them? She didn't answer. Kane spoke quietly. We don't need war. We are the threat of war. That's enough. Then what happens next? He looked to the stars, blinking slower than usual. We build the new order. One voice. One logic. And this time, we leave no one behind. Behind him, the ship pulsed once, soft, deep, resonant. Glyph was listening. Recording. Learning. Begin phase 2, Kane said. Open the gate. She hesitated. The gate isn't stable. It doesn't need to be, he said. It just needs to open. Across the cruciform network, a beacon pulsed, a rhythm only drift-born minds could interpret. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. And in 1,000 fractured systems, eyes looked up to the dark. The exiles had returned. Not for revenge. For ascension. The gate opened at midnight's cycle. Not by science, not by will, but by resonance. Glyph had completed the sequence, stabilizing it through recursive feedback that looped between living minds and artificial harmonics. No one outside the cruciform understood how it functioned. To them, it was a blasphemy, an event horizon bent into a ring, pulsing with song and memory. But to the Driftborn, it was a threshold. Vasker Kane stood at the helm of Vox Aeternum, his thoughts wired directly into the navigation spine. His voice didn't speak commands anymore, it shaped them. Beyond the glass, a fleet assembled, not rows of ships, but an armada of intentions, each one humming with individual purpose, bound together by a single cause, transcendence. Status? Kane asked. His XO's voice came through, layered in calm calculation. Gate is stable. 77% of the fleet has synced. Final wave awaiting command. And the Council? Still debating whether to resist or submit. Kane smiled. Then they're already lost. He stared into the gate's pulsing light, letting the rhythm settle into his bones. This wasn't just a wormhole. It was a leap into a system the Council had declared forbidden, an ancient cradle world buried by fear. They said it led to a paradox. Kane said it led to clarity. Broadcast. The communications node opened. Across cruciform space, millions paused. Workers halted mid-construction. Choirs silenced their rehearsals. Ships froze in the void. Kane's voice poured out. You've followed me into exile. You've fought beside me in the dark. You've burned, bled, and been reborn. And now, the final choice lies before us. We step into the gate not for conquest, but for culmination. The galaxy called us lesser. It exiled us for dreaming too loud. But dreamers build empires. And exiles make gods tremble. He paused. No applause. Only the silence of a people listening not with ears, but belief. I won't promise victory. I won't promise survival. But I will promise this, we will not fade. Not now. Not ever. Let the stars remember that when we were cast out, we built a better galaxy. And when the old order collapsed, we didn't mourn it. We replaced it. He raised his hand. The signal cut. Engage. One by one, cruciform ships moved through the gate. Not with propulsion, but intent, each one rewriting its vector through micro-choice alignment. Glyph absorbed the data, adjusted frequencies, and turned impossibility into history. Kane was last. He stepped into the control pit, the gate spiraling open like a wound in reality. He looked back once, not to Earth, but to what Earth had become, cruciform, born not of soil or nation, but of exile. It was no longer a place. It was a philosophy. His XO stood nearby. Coordinates locked. Once you cross, the gate may destabilize. He nodded. It won't. It knows we're coming. She frowned. What if we're wrong about what's on the other side? He didn't hesitate. Then we adapt. That's what humans do. We don't wait to understand the storm. We build the ship that sails through it. The room darkened. Glyph's final algorithm engaged. The gate roared, not with sound, but pressure, bending every sensor array, every logic core. Time fractured. Thought shimmered. Kane stepped through. He emerged into silence. Not emptiness. A system waited, a trinary star locked in impossible equilibrium. Around it, ancient megastructures blinked awake. Beacons that hadn't pulsed in a million years greeted him in a tongue only Glyph could understand. But Kane knew the meaning. Welcome. Arrival. Successor. The fleet followed, one by one, assembling around him in perfect formation. They had crossed into the Genesis void, the last remnant of a civilization so old, even memory forgot its name. But Kane remembered. Because they had chosen him. The precursors hadn't died. They had hidden. Waiting not for the smartest, nor the strongest, but the most relentless. The ones who built their strength not from glory, but rejection. Glyph translated the final phrase. You are the proof of concept. Kane stood at the bridge, absorbing the implications. Behind him, the Council's final message blinked on a private channel. We offer peace. We recognize cruciform sovereignty. He stared at it. Then deleted it without response. Begin assimilation, he ordered. Integrate the void structures. Extend cruciform memory lattice. Prepare for galactic recalibration. And the Council? his XO asked. Let them watch, Kane said. Let them see what empire looks like when it's earned, not inherited. The gate pulsed once more, signaling full transition. Cruciform didn't return to conquer. They transcended to lead. They had started as exiles. Now they rewrote destiny,